I was just asked by a reporter from Voice of America this morning about what do I think what our position should be with respect to the torture and imprisonment and murder of Iranians who are simply searching for freedom. I think that we have to put maximum pressure on the Iranian leadership. So we have to work. Senator Shaheen, I'm glad that she's speaking. Senator Shaheen and I are the co-leads for the Senate NATO Observer Group. This is a message that we're bringing to our NATO partners and allies. We have to remind them, and they know, that they're aiding and abetting the rape, murder, and torture of the people of Ukraine. It's not enough for them to repress the Iranian people, but they're exporting their hate and their terror to a sovereign nation, supporting a nation that I believe also is a state sponsor of terror, in Russia. We have to keep economic pressure on. We have to hold them accountable. We have to have the world organizations recognize what they're doing. And we can't let our foot off the gas pedal until we have a regime change. There's no way for these leaders to change their heart. There's no way. And so we have to use every device of our global, with all of our global partners that we have available to complete the job that you all are working so hard on. So to the Iranian people and to Iranian Americans, know that I'll stand with you every step along the way. And hopefully, we will see a change so that tens of millions of honest, hardworking, freedom-seeking Iranians begin to enjoy the freedoms sometimes in this country we kind of take for granted every day.
In the previous uprisings, the Iranian people questioned the U.S. on where it stands. Will they stand on their side or beside their murderers? This question is more critical today than ever, considering the revolution developing across the country for the past 3 months. The U.S. has this historic opportunity to stand on the right side of history.
So anyway, we live in historic times, and this is a historic moment in the times in which we live. Let's seize it. So I'll sit down with Gene, see what we can do to lend our voice to the people out on the streets and the villages and the towns of Iran, saying enough is enough. I think we've reached a point now in the 21st century where it's a time of choosing. So I choose the people of Iran over the Ayatollah. Thank you very much.
The people have defied state-sanctioned violence, decades of injustice, in order to make their voices heard. And the person, as we all know, who was at the center of this fight was Mahsa Amini, known to her friends as Gina. She was a young Kurdish woman with big dreams, with a bright future, and yet she died away from those who loved her in a detention facility controlled through state-sanctioned violence. But what's so amazing about this moment is that even in death, Mahsa Amini is not alone, because in her memory, scores of incredibly brave women, supported by men, have taken to the streets to protest the brutal regime. And they do this despite what we've seen are the consequences, and the photos that are all around here show what the consequences are of their actions. So the world is watching, and we are standing in awe of what's happening in Iran, but it's not enough to be impressed by their bravery. We must also stand in lockstep with the people of Iran as they struggle to take back control of their lives and their freedoms. And so I wanted you to know that yesterday in the Foreign Relations Committee, I'm the only woman who sits on the Foreign Relations Committee here in our Congress. We need to change that. But we passed a resolution commending the bravery, courage, and resolve of the women and men of Iran, demonstrating in more than 80 cities, risking their safety to speak out against the Iranian regime's human rights abuses. And I'm not going to read all of it because it's quite long, but there are some parts of it that I think you all will be interested in.
And there is a revolution happening in Iran. It's a revolution. We've seen in the streets that there are people from all walks of life that are protesting, whether it's the universities, the villages, the cities, different areas, the Kurds. People are coming together. This is a unified revolution. And it's been a long time in the making. You all know that because you have been working on this for a long time, for decades. And now is the time to stand with the Iranian people. Day 84 of the uprising, here they are chanting, "Death to Khomeini, death to the oppressor," whether it be the Shah or the supreme leader. This regime has murdered tens of thousands of women. Many of them you know. Many people that you have lost have been killed by this regime. And time and again, they continue to torture and murder those who seek freedom. No one knows this more than the MEK and those who are in Camp Ashraf. During this protest, there have already been hundreds who have been killed by this regime. We heard today, now there's one leader that has been working on this for decades, who has seen this revolution coming for a long time and has supported it. And that is Mrs. Rajavi, the president-elect of the NCRI. It was beautiful to hear her today, and Mrs. Rajavi has had the foresight to predict that women would lead this revolution. In a speech 17 years ago, she said, "In the tragedy of women in our enchained homeland, Iran, women's human identity has been denied. But I assure you that those oppressed today will be the victors of tomorrow." Now is the time for victory for the people of Iran. And we know that there is an alternative because Mrs. Rajavi and the NCRI have a 10-point plan, a 10-point plan that envisions freedom, democracy, a non-nuclear Iran, a peaceful Iran that respects human rights. That is the Iranian people, that is what they deserve, and that is the Iran that we can work with as the United States of America. That is the Iran where values are respected and people are respected. This is the moment to stand with the Iranian people and their fight for freedom. This revolution is coming, and the United States needs to support this revolution and to end the reign of the Ayatollahs.
So thank you for being here. Thank you for all you represent. I think you know that most of us are firmly in your corner, and we're going to do anything that we can to push things forward. I can't match what Kelly said, and Senator Lieberman, the great work that he does, and then Roy Blunt, I see him here that also is a tremendous champion. So thank you for allowing me to be part of this. And my commitment is to help any way we can, but certainly regarding nuclear weapons, human rights, all of those kind of things, again, we are firmly in your corner. But I can't tell you, how important it is that you're here, talking to people like us, talking to the people that represent you throughout the country, making a difference. There's simply no substitute for that. So again, thank you very much.
When you have a country where the government has to execute people to try to keep everybody else in line, like they did last night, when you have a government where the government has to raid the biggest universities to try to keep people subjugated to what they want to do, there's clearly a problem there that the world needs to stand up for. As Senator Bozeman just said, whether it's our great members who have left the Senate, like Senator Lieberman and Kelly Ayotte, or people in the Senate, we are doing our best to try to encourage every way we can the right things to happen there. As you know, I've been working for some time now with the government in Albania, and I went to Albania to see people once we finally got them in a place where they were more safe than they had been before. But that challenge continues. Freedom matters. Freedom is worth fighting for. Freedom is worth encouraging. And what we're seeing in every province of the country shows that people are willing to risk their lives and even give their lives for freedom. The least we can do is everything we can possibly do to encourage that, to support that, to be sure that our government, which is based on an ever-ending pursuit of freedom, is for that in other places.
What's happening now in Iran is inspiring, but it's also unprecedented since the Islamic regime took over more than 4 decades ago. This has become a genuine uprising, and I think it's time to start calling it what it is, a revolution to liberate the people of Iran from the totalitarian government that has enslaved them for too many years. So this remarkable historical event gives each of us, and today, focus on our representatives in Congress, unprecedented opportunities that we maybe didn't dream would happen this soon, but it also gives us responsibilities to support the heroes of the revolution in Iran and to do everything we can to help them achieve their goal, which is and must be no less than the overthrow of the totalitarian terrorist regime in Tehran. And let me say first that as we consider what should happen now, we have a responsibility, historic and moral, to look back and to pay tribute for all who have held this hope of a free Iran alive for decades now, courageous Iranian patriots both inside and outside the country. And I will say in this regard that no organization has done more to light candles of hope and freedom through the darkest days of repression and mass murder in Iran than the National Council of Resistance in Iran, led by Mrs. Maryam Rajavi. And really, history must note that, but we can begin it by noting it and expressing our appreciation itself. Somebody once said to me long ago, comparing fire and water, that if you pour water from a pitcher, there's less water in the pitcher. If you take a light on a candle and light another candle, the first candle burns as brightly as ever. And now, if I may consider this and continue this metaphor of the lights that NCRI, MEK, Organization of Iranian American Communities, have been lighting for decades are now being held high. They've been spread by millions of Iranians. And as I said, what is true is that the torches that NCRI held up for years and have now been lighting the other candles throughout the country have not diminished at all. The torch of the NCR-MEK grows brighter. In my opinion, with each passing day, the organization gives us confidence that the current regime will be overthrown, and most importantly, that when it is, there will be leaders ready to guide Iran smoothly into its free and democratic future. And that is the organizations that you're part of.
Let me start off by thanking the Organization of Iranian Communities for putting together today's event on Capitol Hill. I'm thrilled to see so many Iranian Americans from across the country. And I'd like to thank and recognize the National Council of Resistance of Iran for their commitment to elevating your voices, the voices of Iranians inside of Iran, and in constantly advocating for the freedom of the Iranian people. As we all know here in this room, there is a critical inflection point for every Iranian fighting for their fundamental rights. 3 months ago, the Iranian morality police beat Mahsa Amini to death for not properly wearing her hijab. In the aftermath, we have seen the incredible bravery and courage from Iranians of all walks of life. The actions of this regime won't come as a surprise for anyone who has been paying attention to Iran over the years. I certainly have, since my days in the House of Representatives. Everyone here knows how intractable and dishonest the Iranian regime has been. They have repressed and tortured many of your friends and family. There are too many pictures here on each side of me. Family members and colleagues who've been opposing the regime for decades. They have massacred innocent political prisoners. And now, on full display across social media, we are seeing how ruthless and desperate they are to keep their grip on power. The difference between what we see now and in the past is simply that more people in the world are understanding the depravity of this regime. And that is what we need to keep alive, the ability for people here in our country, in our leadership, and across the globe to understand the depravity of this regime and what it means and why it is necessary to give echo and support to the voices of those inside of Iran who are facing great risk in order to pursue their basic human rights. It is why I have pushed to amplify the voices of Iranian protesters around the world using social media and other technologies and American surrogate networks. To those who say we shouldn't get too much in the advocacy for Iranian protesters because it may seem like America generating this, I say giving voice to those inside of Iran so that what they say can be heard across the globe is Iranians protesting against the regime. It is why I think the United States needs to be raising this issue in every international forum that we can, as we have done with allies from the UN Human Rights Council to the Commission on Women. And we should be using the tools we have to help circumvent the regime's efforts to jam communications of its own people. And we should invoke Magnitsky and other sanctions against those who are perpetrating this heinous act. They must know that they are not beyond the reach of justice. So let us keep standing up to the regime's human rights violations and violence. Let us continue to protect those in Ashraf-free, and I am committed to doing that. Let's keep fighting the senseless repression of women and girls. Let's keep the world's eyes riveted on Tehran's ruthlessness, because if we work together and we stick to our shared American democratic values and principles, I believe there is nothing we cannot achieve here and for the Iranian people in Iran. Thank you so much.
The spark that lit this revolution a few months ago was really just a spark in a long chain of efforts since the 1979 revolution to overthrow this regime. Maryam Rajavi, who I have had the privilege of knowing, said it all too well, that women are leading this revolution. And in the revolution that they lead, they're offering a new hope and democracy for the people of Iran. And think about what the MEK and NCRI support has meant. Iranian freedom fighters have a crucial social media access as a result of your hard work. They are receiving funds and resources and training. They know that secretly for almost 2 decades, the MEK has had cells operating in Iran to help train these young women and young students on how, in effect, to fight for freedom when the oppressors are determined to kill you. They have access to a network of resistance units that are being recognized around the world. And with all due respect to my friends in the Biden administration, it's about time that they ended their own resistance in embracing the MEK and the NCRI for, in effect, providing the resources and support for the very cause that they claim they now embrace.
For generations, women and ethnic minorities have faced violent oppression on behalf of the Iranian government. Mahsa Amini's murder was only the latest in a long string of human rights violations. But in September, and this is what gives us hope and inspiration, we saw protests erupt throughout the country. Women and men from different classes and different regions banded together to speak out against the systemic persecution of women. People are standing up. Family, friends, and neighbors in Mahsa's hometown joined the outcry after a life was stolen from them. And so to the women of Iran, I want to say loudly and clearly that we are moved by your courage and your strength. And to all Iranians calling for their fundamental rights to be respected, let me say loudly and clearly that the United States stands with you. We are calling for an immediate end to the barbaric detention of peaceful protesters, an immediate end to the blatant human rights violations, and an immediate end to the persecution of Iranian women. And until then, we will continue to hold the Iranian regime accountable for their actions. And in America, the voices of the Iranian people crying out for freedom will always be heard and respected.
We have seen extraordinary things happen with the Iranian people. Courage and heroism, this incredible willingness to do what is almost unimaginable, to put yourselves and your families' safety and security on the line for freedom. It's one of the things we herald of heroes in our own country's history, that we're willing to sacrifice so much, to put so much on the line. And of course, during times of great peril and great challenge, you have, unfortunately, great martyrs. In this nation's history, from our earliest days, we've seen patriots who died for their country, who were willing to put themselves before outrageous injustice. And as much as we think of that in America often in the longest time ago, even in more recent years, we've seen those kind of Americans like Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, who were murdered for their beliefs in voting rights. And so I just want to say, in the short minutes I have before I have to run back to the Senate floor to preside, that the people of Iran are fighting a cause even bigger than themselves and Iranians. They're fighting a human cause. They're fighting for the cause of freedom. They're fighting for the cause of democracy. And I stand with the people of Iran. And what is really great, as you can see, a man, I have to admit that in this country's history, as well as in Iran, the women are leading the way. I mean, I see this extraordinary courage by women and girls who are pricking the consciousness of our world, who are calling to the moral imagination of their own people, who are fighting not just for basic rights and freedom, but also what should be, to me, fundamental for all humanity, this idea of human dignity and respect.